bit of sun, a little bit of rain. You
Yeah.
cannot
Well,
pick any
we had.
good week.
Uh, I in particular wasn't hit very hard, but a bunch of areas around me got flooded pretty badly with like 5 days of heavy rain. But today is cloudy. Well, a mix of sun and cloud. Thursday it'll rain. Friday is a mix of sun and cloud. Saturday it'll rain. Sunday it'll rain. Monday mix of sun and cloud, and Tuesday a mix of sun and cloud. But it's
Uh,
going to slowly go from 10 degrees to 13, 14, 17, 18. So while the weekend's going to be wet and miserable, next week looks to be sunny and nice.
okay.
But we're not quite out of getting into the single digits at nighttime yet.
Yeah, the nights are cold still. In the mornings, you just need a coat, and in the afternoon, you just throw everything
Average for
off.
this time of year, the average high is 17, and we're not going to hit that until Monday of next week. So it's definitely slightly chillier than usual this week. But yes, and monthly precipitation is 41% chance each day. So the fact that we're going to get rain 3 out of 7 days makes sense.
Hmm.
Anyway, enough with the weather report.
Yeah, the weekly BSD weather.
Well, I flew from the raining and flooding here to the West Coast where they had sudden rain and flooding.
What a surprise.
It was like, how can 3 different parts of Canada that are far apart from each other all be having the same weather at the same time? It was 3 separate rainstorms, but anyway. Okay. You ready to get started then? And recording.
Okay. Well, that was different. Okay.
That's what I always do.
No, there was a little bit of variety there. Okay.
Okay, give yourself a second to stop laughing and then start.
BSD Now, episode 193. Fire up the 802 AC. Recorded on not November. Sorry.
Do we?
Why November?
I write the dates in the doc in universal format to prevent this problem, right?
Yeah, but
Oh well,
yeah,
the doc says XXXX, so that really doesn't help at all either, does it?
yeah, but I have a calendar here, so I don't know how November came up.
Yes. Okay. Hold on. Let me start a fresh clip because this is getting slightly ridiculous. Let's see if I can spell it out in phonetic.
Ja, just for me. Mai, der 10. Genau, yeah, right. How hard could it be?
You don't want to know. And recording.
BSD Now, episode 193. Fire up the 802 AC. Recorded on May 10, 2017. Hi, I'm Benedikt Reuschling.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we have a great show, as always, prepared for you, so we should get right into the headlines, which brings us to a little connection to last episode, where we talked a lot about Wi-Fi from Adrian Chat, and there's a new blog post on his blog, so this one goes about 802.1 AC, and the blog post basically explains the upbringing of 802.11 AC. So what's this all about, Alan?
Right. So Adrian has a blog post which is bringing up 802.11 AC, which, if you don't know, 802.11 AC is the successor to 802.11n, and it provides the next step up in Wi-Fi speeds, which offer speeds of up to 500 megabits per stream, but in total can provide bandwidth of multiple gigabits. So part of the new thing with 802.11c is that the total speed of the network isn't divided between all the connected clients, so you don't get the speed doesn't drop off as badly when you get a couple people connected to the network. So with 802.11ac, you can get up to 2 point something gigabits per second divided by the number of clients, so you get a much better, available bandwidth.
So this is desirable,
Yep.
and pretty much Adrian is working on that in FreeBSD.
He says the FreeBSD 802.11 stack was recently has reasonably good support for 802.11n, but no AC support yet. I decided a while ago to start adding basic AC support. It was good exercise in figuring out what the minimum set of required features are, and another excuse to go find some of the broken corner cases that are actually in the 802.11 framework. So this is 802.11 AC introduces a few new concepts that the stack needs to understand to be able to do 802.11. I decided to use the QCA 802.11 AC parts, which is the Qualcomm Atheros, because A, he knows the firmware and general chip stuff, because he worked on the first generation of those parts, and he knows that it does a bunch of stuff like the rate control, packet scheduling, etc. in hardware, so he doesn't have to do it in the driver, which means he'll be able to get support up sooner.
Makes sense.
He says, if I choose, say, Intel 11AC parts, then I'd have to implement a lot of that fiddly stuff in software to get good behavior. So that's why he's starting with the Atheros part. Plus, Atheros has been usually one of the best supported Wi-Fis for a while, so it makes sense to start with that one. So step one was adding support for VHT channels. He says he decided in the shorter term to cheat and just add the VHT channels to the already very large IEEE 802.11 channel map. The Linux way of doing it is to have a channel context rather than hundreds of static channels to choose from. Is better in the long run, but rather than building all that infrastructure, he just made the really long list to get started with, and he'll go back and fix it after. So that's what he did first. He added the VHT flags for 20, 40, 80, and 80 plus 80 megahertz separation between channels. And so that offers and the 160 megahertz operational modes, and he did the bare work required to populate the channel lists for all of those VHT channels. Then he needed to glue all that into the 11AC driver. His ATH10K port was far enough along to attempt this, so he added just enough glue to say, I support VHT to the capabilities field, and propagated it to the driver for a monitor mode configuration, which is just where the Wi-Fi chip listens and provides to the computer the packets that it sees. And after a bit of dancing, he managed to get the VHT channels to show up in the ATH10K monitor mode and could actually capture 80 megahertz wide packets. So that was a success.
Good.
He says, by far the most fiddly thing was getting channel promotion to work. 802.11 supports the concept of dumb NICs, like the Atheros ABGN part numbers, very well, where you can have multiple virtual interfaces for the driver view of the right configuration that's programmed into the hardware. For firmware NICs, which do this themselves, and basically almost everything sold today is that way, where you load the firmware via the operating system, this isn't exactly all that helpful. So for now, it's limited to a single virtual access point, and the virtual access point configuration is partially derived from the global state of the driver and partially derived from negotiated state of the connection. It's annoying, but it's added to the list of things that he'll have to fix later.
Yeah, of course, this is a lot more work.
Let's get the basic stuff working first, and then we'll deal with the more complicated stuff. Luckily, the QCA chips and firmware do 802.11 crypto offload. They actually pretend that there's no key. You don't include the initialization vector. You don't include padding or anything like that. You just send commands to set the crypto keys, and then you send your unencrypted 802.11 frames, or even 802.3 frames, which is regular wired Ethernet. And all you have to do, you just send those to the driver, and the card actually does the crypto for you. Making it that much easier to write the driver because there's that much less code you have to worry about.
Yeah, it's the hardware doing some of the work.
In time when we starts adding other drivers support for, say, the Intel cards, some of that work will have to be done in the driver. But it means that in order to get this, he had to add some more features to the framework. Frames decrypted by the hardware needed to have the I'm already decrypted bit set. Otherwise, the 802.11 header field says I'm decrypted is cleared, and so you're trying to decrypt already decrypted data, and that's gonna make a really strange looking message. Frames encrypted don't have the I'm encrypted bit set, so that doesn't actually get work. And then frames encrypted and decrypted have no padding, so I need to teach the input path that CryptoPaths do not validate those if the hardware says it's offloading the work. He says, now comes the hard bit of fixing those shortcomings before I can commit the driver. There are lots of those. The first one is the global state. Currently, the ATH10K firmware allows you to call VDEVs or virtual devices. For example, multiple SSIDs or BSSID support is implemented by using multiple virtual interfaces on top of the physical interface. And the station and WDS modes are implemented with a virtual device as well, and same with station plus P2P mode. So technically speaking, I should go and find all the global state that should be per virtual device and make it per virtual device. This is tricky though, because a lot of the state isn't kept per virtual AP, even though it should be. Mm-hmm. So quite a bit of work before we can properly support having multiple access points off one card and so on.
Yeah, setting the initial, providing the driver basics and framework.
Well, currently a number of the variables are like global to the whole operating system. And so if you want to have the setting be different for two different virtual access points, that's currently not supported. He says, anyway, so far so good. I need to do some of the big list of things above and then land it in FreeBSD head so we can finish off the ATH10K port and commit that to FreeBSD. Right, so he's got to finish the updates to the 802.11 framework so that he can then commit the updates to the drivers. And then there's a lot of other stuff coming, including all the Wave 2 stuff, like multi-user MIMO and MU MIMO, which allows using multiple antennas, and it is how we get this. While each user can have 500 megabits, we can actually do more than that in aggregate by having multiple users talking on different channels at the same time. And he says, which I just plainly haven't talked about yet. He hasn't even got to the MIMO stuff. But he says...
Yeah, this is a lot different work as well.
He says, Viva la FreeBSD Wi-Fi. Or wireless.
Yeah. It's nice to have, and we're probably all waiting for it to land in head, but there's a lot more testing and development going on before we see it, or can fiddle with it at least, or do some basic tests.
Yep.
What about hardware? Do you also need special new hardware, or is that
currently he's working on the drivers for the Atheros 10K chips, which are the new ones that support this 11AC.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know like which Wi-Fi NICs and laptops support this yet, and also what is going to be the most common chipsets for 11AC in, say, the little embedded routers that you might want to flash FreeBSD onto, because we'd obviously like to get support for that as well. That is often Atheros, but not always. So maybe that's part of the reason he's probably targeting the Atheros part first, is because it's likely to be the one used in routers.
Right. So that would be a thing to look out for in the future. And probably we'll have a couple of episodes talking about further development in this area.
Yep. So next up.
Okay. The next one is, let me see. So pfSense and OpenVPN routing from TerraFounder website. And this is basically an article which also has a couple of tutorial points in it. So it basically starts off with a big disclaimer. So this is a framework for getting up and running, but they don't claim any responsibility for the network not working afterwards. And so we have to be a little bit
in particular, when you're messing with
these.
the router, it's very handy to have a backup internet connection, like maybe just the LTE or whatever on your phone, so that you can look up instructions when things stop working.
Just in case, yeah.
So, be careful not to lock yourself out here. But basically what this tutorial is talking about is how to set up an OpenVPN to an endpoint somewhere else and have one VLAN on your home network or office network where anything going out goes through the VPN and exits there, while having an insecure VLAN where that traffic just goes out over your naked internet connection. Allowing you to say, this device is going to have its traffic go over the VPN and end up somewhere looking for like it's coming from somewhere else, whereas this stuff is going to use your raw internet connection. obviously you need that for at a minimum. You have to send the VPN connection over your raw internet. You can't send the VPN over the VPN because
Yeah.
it has no way to get there. But yes, this article tries to be a simple guide on how to set up your home or small office pfSense to route some traffic via the vanilla internet and some via a VPN that's set out to a remote location. You could do a slight variation of this where what you want to do is bridge the LANs between two offices so that all those machines can appear as if they're on the same LAN, but stuff trying to go to the internet can go over the naked internet on both ends.
That makes working much easier and safer as well.
Yeah. So he talks a little bit about why you might want to use a VPN. His first point is about control, right? You've worked in places where you're utilizing VPN connections for accessing infrastructure located off-site, right? If you need to reach something at the remote office, you'd rather do it over the VPN and then come from the inside than be trying to access it via the internet or whatever. And there's a lot of advantages there. The other is security. You can get security from VPN. For example, you can set up a series of SIP phones that are incapable of using TLS or something, meaning that each call went over the internet unencrypted. But if you VPN tunnel it to somewhere, then all that unencrypted traffic suddenly is encrypted. He says, obviously, privacy could be a reason. In this particular tutorial, it was decided that build this setup and blog about it because of the recent news in the UK media surrounding the new Snoopers Charter, or whatever they called it in the UK, where they're going to be keeping track of what people are doing and so on. So you might want to do that. And then his other point was it could just be for fun. It's a good reason to just try to learn how to do it. It can just be for
and learn about the
networking bits and get to play with it and learn how it works. So he does say, be aware, VPNs do not instantly guarantee privacy. They're just a layer, and there are other measures you might invoke. In this example, the server that is the far end of this VPN is rented directly in his name with his credit card, so it's easily traced back to him, and, there's that. If you use the VPN and then log into your Facebook account, it obviously establishes that VPN is you. You're going to have, if you actually want to have privacy, you're going to have to practice some, OPSEC and so on as well.
Yeah, it's not just you run a VPN and everything solves.
It's not magic.
It's much more. It's not the holy grail of anonymity and security. It's one layer and an important layer, but
it really depends who you're trying to protect yourself from, right? If it's just your ISP and you don't want them to see which websites you're going to, maybe that helps. But if you're trying to protect yourself against a state actor, then that's probably not enough. Says that there's also no reason you have to, have your own VPN, OpenVPN install, right? You don't have to own the server on the far end. There are many different personal VPN providers out there. Some of them even offer, you and 100 other users will share the same IP address, which will mix your traffic with theirs and make it harder to distinguish who's who. But,
the typical hotel setup.
They're making it sound like they're doing this for your benefit, but often it's usually just to save IP addresses because those are expensive. But anyway, they also a really important point that a lot of people don't seem to grasp is that VPNs can be slow. Part of the reason why they have this split setup where some traffic doesn't go over the VPN is because usually, your VPN speed is limited by the upload of the other side, right? When you're using a VPN and tunneling all your traffic from your computer to some other computer and then to the internet, the speed is going to be basically capped by the slowest link in the chain. And so, if the server you're VPNing through can't upload very fast, it can't send the data to you very quickly. And you also have to consider bandwidth caps, right? If you want to download a video over the VPN, then it has to be downloaded from the internet to the VPN server, and then the VPN server has to upload it to you, and then you have to download it. So now you've downloaded it once, but the VPN endpoint has both downloaded it and uploaded it using twice as much bandwidth in there. So you've actually tripled the amount of bandwidth in total being used, although it's used in different places and it depends where the quotas are and so on.
Yeah, there's a whole
Yeah.
lot going on behind the scenes that you usually don't
And
see.
in almost every case, it's going to add latency, right? The number of hops has gone up, and the amount of time it takes to get from here to there and back is going to be higher through a VPN than not. So it says, when I want to connect to the internet quickly and that I'm never doing sensitive things, like my banking, I don't mind doing Reddit browsing and IRC messages being slower, but, I want the PS4 to be on the fast connection.
Yeah, with all those patches and first day patches, you want to get started playing.
Services like Netflix can and do block VPN traffic in some cases. This is more of an issue for wider VPN providers, if you're not hosting it yourself, but Netflix can definitely block that, and a lot of other sites can do it as well, meaning that, using a VPN might make it harder to do certain things. If your VPN is in another country, this can affect your search results and tracking and a bunch of other things. I know we've all been annoyed when traveling and suddenly getting Google search results in a different language. It's like, I don't speak Swedish.
Or the Google search page, completely different language. Yeah, it's always interesting to see, but sometimes you don't get the results you usually expect.
But yeah, it's just, for some features, it can be annoying, right? If your DuckDuckGo results are tailored for the middle of Paris rather than where you live in the UK, that can really be frustrating. But the tutorial walks you through the process, including labeling the interfaces so that you can tell which one's which, configuring DHCP on the internet side and also on the server side to give out the two different subnets, one for your secured LAN that goes over the VPN and one for the unsecured that just goes over the naked internet, and then actually creating the VPN and setting that up. Now that we have the OpenVPN connection up, now we got to assign that to an interface. So they'll create a new interface called OpenVPN that routes the traffic via that. Then you got to go charging full stream ahead and hope that we haven't lost any people at this point. But we actually set up NAT and specifically say we want to masquerade all traffic via the LAN interface to go out the IP address of the OpenVPN endpoint. And then it shows you how to configure that. And then we want to switch the NAT mode to hybrid so that it'll work both ways. Then configuring the LAN interface so that it's NATed out and the insecure interface uses your ISP's connection. And then configure the firewall to allow traffic from the LAN network to go to the insecure network and back without actually going through the VPN. Right? If you want to go from a secure device in your house to an insecure device in your house, you don't want to send that over the internet at all. You would just want to do it locally. So you can make sure that all your devices can talk to each other. Then we add another rule to allow traffic from the LAN to go to any address, and we force the gateway of that to be the OpenVPN connection so that whenever something in your LAN is trying to reach the internet, rather than using your ISP's gateway, it goes out through the OpenVPN connection.
So there's a fine separation here.
And it shows you with screenshots of the pfSense GUI how to do it all. It looks relatively straightforward if you follow along and do that.
Yeah, so check that out if you are considering a VPN solution or haven't tried OpenVPN with pfSense yet. This might be a good starting point.
Yep. And it even shows some examples of testing to make sure that all the different bits of the configuration are working and help you troubleshoot them if they don't. And there's that.
Okay. And our next story is about switching to OpenBSD. And I mentioned that is switching from macOS. So there's a blog entry from Michael Hendricks, and he writes basically as a short story, after 12 years, he switched from macOS to OpenBSD because it's clean, focused, stable, consistent, and lets him get his work done without any hassle. And the long story is basically when he first became interested in computers, he thought operating systems were fascinating. Well, yeah, that's pretty much the reason we all got into it at one point. For years, he would reinstall an operating system every other weekend just to try a different configuration. MS-DOS, the Windows, the Linux 1.0, countless hours recompiling kernels, all this thing. In high school, he settled down and ran OS/2 for 5 years until he graduated college, and he switched to Linux after college and used it exclusively for also 5 years. He got tired of configuring Linux at one point, so he switched to OS X for the next 12 years, where things just worked. Yeah, until recently, I guess. Yeah, I was pretty happy with OS X. He gave Unix and mostly got out of the way so that he could write software. That's his main focus. And he wrote about enjoying Apple's simplicity in a separate blog post. Snow Leopard even spent an entire release cycle just fixing bugs and improvements. But Snow Leopard was 7 years ago, which is a long time in OS land. And these days, OS X is like running a denial of service attack against yourself. So macOS has a dozen apps he doesn't use but can't remove at all. That's true. Some of them are very resistant to being removed from the system without doing very extreme measures. Updating them requires a restart. That's also unfortunate at one point, especially if you can have like multiple day uptimes on your notebook in some cases with the suspend and resume. Frequent updates to the browser require a restart. Minor Xcode update requires me to download a 4.3 gigabyte file. Yeah, we have all been there. The monitors frequently turn off and require a restart to fix. So there's a couple of things that bugs him and he doesn't like very much with the latest macOS. So where do I go from now, he asks. So he says he owns 5 Chromebooks, and they have great availability. Updates are infrequent, small, fast, and nearly transparent. Unfortunately, he needs an OS where he can write and compile code. I also want to run it on an older, commonly commodity hardware, so I can replace a common laptop for $500 instead of for $2,000. I considered several Linux distributions. Ubuntu seemed promising, but it was too bloated for my taste. And a couple of years ago, he tried Ubuntu on a Dell XPS Developer Edition for a few months. Even with hardware designed for Linux, it was too fragile. And desktop Linux was also become even more complex than what he was used to a decade ago. He just wanted to get his work done, not feed and maintain an OS. And that was basically the reason to switch to OpenBSD for him. He was reminded of OpenBSD during the Heartbleed scare. Each time I hear Heartbleed, I immediately remember where we were sitting back at the EuroBSDCon conference, and we were like, "Oh, Heartbleed. Okay, well, just another security of the day, security vulnerability." So he writes, while everyone else was complaining about OpenSSL and claiming that open source had failed, the OpenBSD developers quietly drew their machines and hacked out hundreds of thousands of lines of bad code, forking off LibreSSL where they can keep it clean and stable. So the OpenBSD community is like that. Focus on what's really important. Hold your code to a high standard. Ignore all the distractions. They're not trying to live in the past, just trying to make the future a place worth living. Yeah, that sums it pretty well. Anyway, he found OpenBSD was very refreshing, so he created a bootable thumb drive and within an hour had it up and running on a 2-year-old laptop. And he's been using it for his daily work of the past 2 weekends, and it's been great so far. Simple, boring, and productive, all at the same time. Just the way he likes it. The documentation is fantastic. He's been using Unix for years and has learned quite a bit just by reading the man pages. And the OS releases come like clockwork every 6 months and are supported for 12 at least. Yeah, 12. Security and other updates seem relatively rare between releases, roughly 1 small patch per week during 6.0. And with syspatch in 6.1, installing them should be really easy too. So that's pretty much a good experience report about running OpenBSD. And that pretty much, there's a couple of comments in there. So if you have similar experiences, you might comment as well, exchange some ideas or some things you stumbled upon maybe, and share some experiences that you have. And I mean, with the recent change in the Apple notebooks with the, the fancy bar where the escape key is no longer a real key, a couple of people were turned off and were looking for different alternatives.
The limits to the hardware and the the fact that there are no useless shippable parts anymore, so you can't really replace the battery.
Yeah, all these things. At one point, people think about different solutions for their problems, especially when they are looking for a new notebook or laptop, and think about also the price point and want just get things done or do some basic compiling stuff, then you don't have to buy a big expensive notebook.
Yep.
If OpenBSD and the free community provides everything for you.
So this week's episode of BSD Now is brought to you by DigitalOcean. If you head over to digitalocean.com and get started with your virtual machine, you can use the coupon code FreeBSDNow, all lowercase, and it'll add a $10 credit to your account, which will help you run a droplet for a month or two, depending on the size of the droplet. The nice thing is they have very straightforward, transparent pricing. You just pick the instance you want, and you pay for it at the hourly rate. But the monthly cost is capped at the monthly price, so if you actually keep the instance on for the whole month, you'll actually save a little bit of money over the hourly cost. But if you start today, which is already 10 or so days into the month, you won't pay the whole $5 the first month. It'll only cost you the fraction of that. That is the number of days you left the instance running.
Yeah, only the hours that you use. And if you are looking for something that's been pre-built, maybe you want to run a LAMP server or just a wiki, there's a couple of pre-built applications available. So you just fire up that specific droplet with an application pre-installed, and you just need to do the special configuration in that without having to do all the installation parts and configurations, because the DigitalOcean folks have done that for you already.
Yep, they let you do whatever size you want. For storage as well, you can attach separate SSD-backed block storage, and you just choose how many gigabytes of space you're going to need, and you just pay, your 10 cents an hour per gigabyte. And you can always expand the size of the storage after, so it works really great for that. When you choose a droplet and set it up, it takes about 55 seconds before that droplet's up and running and you can start using it. It's a great way to try FreeBSD instead of running a VM on your laptop or something. Putting it out in the cloud means that it has a really fast internet connection. Every droplet has at least a gigabit of connection, and it includes a bandwidth quota of 1 terabyte per month for the smallest instance. So it means you can really get out there and try FreeBSD with its own dedicated static IP address. Allows you to really play with things and try all the different things without having, to deal with providing all the resources yourself. It's really quite nice.
Yeah, so check out digitalocean.com and use our coupon code for your first droplet.
Yep, it'll add an extra $10 in your account. So after you get that first droplet up and running, you can keep it running an extra 2 months. Or you could try out the bigger one without having to spend more money. So our next story is one that's really interesting to me. This is a new feature in ZFS.
ZFS.
Yes, ZFS Storage Pool Checkpoint project. So during the OpenZFS Developer Summit last year in 2016, which sadly I missed because it was the Monday after EuroBSDCon in Serbia, so it wasn't possible to...
Yeah, there was no way to get there in time.
And even if I had tried to manage some flight to do it, my flight ended up being delayed on the way home anyway, so it would have messed everything up anyway. Anyway, so during the Dev Summit, which I missed, Dan Kimmel and the author of this blog post quickly hacked together a zpool checkpoint command in ZFS. So with the OpenZFS Developer Summit, it's a 2-day event. The first one is all presentations about work in progress and so on. And the second day is a hackathon where they try to come up with new features or prototypes that they can come up with in about half a day. So you have an idea and you try to make something with it. And then at the end of the day, everybody presents what they've come up with so far, and there are usually prizes.
Oh, nice.
So what they tried to come up with was the ZFS checkpoint command. This basically allows you to do a pool-wide snapshot. So rather than snapshotting individual file systems, this snapshots the entire pool, but it's not quite a snapshot. It's a little different than that. In particular, it's keeping all the configuration data and so on. So it actually allows you to undo operations that it wasn't possible to do before.
Okay, and that was the automation for that
Yeah,
development?
so they say, the zpool checkpoint command in ZFS, which allows you to revert an entire pool to a previous state. Since this was just a hackathon, our design was very bare bones and our implementation was far from complete. But about a month ago, we had a new and almost complete design within Delphix, and I was able to start the implementation. So then the author completed the implementation last month, and now it's currently running through the regression tests. And so while waiting for those to finish, they decided to write this blog post explaining what the storage pool checkpoint is and why they needed it at Delphix and how it's used. So Delphix, which is the company where Matt Ahrens works, if you didn't know, they make they basically have a VM running the Delphix OS, which is their derivative of Illumos, with their application stack on top of it, because they sell a database virtualization appliance. During an upgrade, the VM reboots into the new operating system bits and then runs some scripts to update the environment, right? Moving directories around, snapshots, dealing with open connections, etc. From the new version of our app stack, software though, failures can happen at different points during the upgrade process. When an upgrade script that makes changes to ZFS fails, we have a corresponding rollback script that attempts to bring ZFS and our app stack back to their previous state. But this is very tricky as we have to undo every single modification that was applied to ZFS, including, say, creating new datasets or renaming existing datasets or turning on a new zpool feature, which is not something that can be undone.
Right, you would have to go really deep into the zpool history and figure out what kind of changes were made.
And sometimes there's things like enabling a zpool feature where it's just not possible to undo. So
once it's active, then
the idea of storage pool checkpoint, aka zpool checkpoint, deals with exactly that. It can be thought of as a pool-wide snapshot or a variation of the extreme rewind feature, except for it won't corrupt your data. It remembers the entire state of the pool at the point that it was taken, and the user can revert back to it later or decide to discard the checkpoint. Its generic use case is an administrator that is about to perform a set of destructive actions in ZFS as part of a critical procedure. She takes a checkpoint of the pool before performing the action, then rewind back to it if any one of those actions fails. And it puts the pool back into the expected state instead of left in this, I don't know exactly what failed and I have to try to undo all these things. Or, I've deleted stuff and there's no way to undo that. But if everything goes fine, then she just discards the checkpoint. With the assumption that no one else is making modifications to ZFS, she basically wraps all these actions into a high-level transaction.
For the whole pool, basically.
So they actually have the example in here of, deleting. So they create a new pool, and they create two data sets on it. And you can see here that there's this new checkpoint field, but it's blank. It's just got a dash. But they create a new checkpoint called test on the test pool. Then they destroy the first file system and rename the second one to a different name. So now when we look at the zpool list, we only see the active state as we expect because we deleted one and renamed the other. But when we look at the zpool, we see the checkpoint is actually using 88.5 kilobytes of space. Right? It's remembering that old data set and so on.
Yeah, the differences between the snapshots. Basically.
And when you do zpool status, there's this new checkpoint line saying that there's currently a checkpoint that was created April 22nd, and it is currently using 88.5 K of space. So then, if you want to see the pool, or see the checkpoint, you export the pool and you can import it and you set it read-only and tell it to rewind to the checkpoint. So it'll import the checkpoint, but because you set it read-only, it won't actually save the change. So this allows you to temporarily import the pool in the reverted state, but without actually reverting any data. So you can actually get in here and you could copy files out if you needed to. Or, if while it's exported, if you just do a regular import, you see that you get back the live state that you expected. Or while it's exported, with import, you say rewind to checkpoint, and then it will roll everything back to that checkpoint, including undeleting data sets and so on. And then there's also a way to get rid of a checkpoint. So currently, there can only be one checkpoint. So, the checkpoint doesn't have a name or anything. It's just a checkpoint. The general idea here is that you wouldn't keep it around very long. It would be create a checkpoint, do the changes you want to do, and make sure they're right. If it doesn't all go smoothly, you can always just revert. I definitely see the value of this in an
this
appliance.
Yes, in special cases like this, where you have a VM that needs this functionality, this is something needs.
Any kind of
course,
appliance type setup where, maybe there isn't a console to be able to, and the user isn't interactively doing these steps to upgrade it. It's being done by a script, and you need a safe way to be able to just undo. If the script fails, you don't really want to figure out where it failed or what went wrong. You just want to undo everything and be like, hey, somebody's going to have to do this manually.
Right, but this one is just a very specific feature. You cannot do all the rollbacking on all the changes that a pool could get, like adding devices, for example.
Yes and no. So, there's some caveats and limitations with checkpoints. While a checkpoint exists, you cannot make changes to existing VDEVs. So attach to, create a mirror or add additional drive to a mirror. That cannot be done while a checkpoint exists, because you can't suddenly just undo that. Specifically, detach, definitely. If you have a checkpoint that exists, you will not be able to detach a device. You'll have to destroy the checkpoint first. Because, detach is going to remove a device and stop updating it, and that's not something that you could undo, because, you're not going to be able to, once it's detached, you're not going to keep writing new data to it in order to be able to undo that, and so on. And same for remove or doing mirror splitting or the regrid operation. You're not going to be able to just roll that back. However, there's one example where you can do it with a checkpoint, and that's actually adding a new device. So VDEV add can be undone because it will just ignore that new device after the rewind. This is actually probably the best thing about this. That's not really a limitation of this feature. It's a great second feature. The zpool add operation, I think, is still possibly the most often done incorrectly procedure on ZFS. Even at Linux Fest Northwest, while I was there last weekend, I saw somebody do this live. Somebody else had a storage appliance there, and they were trying to show it off and make all the lights blink, and they had two SSDs they had set up as a mirror for their slog. But when they attached it, they did zpool add mirror the two devices. Well, they forgot the log keyword, and so what they ended up doing was taking their two RAID Z1s and adding a mirror to the end of it.
Which made it unbalanced.
ZFS tries to stop you doing that, but every time somebody gets that error, they just add -F instead of realizing that they made a mistake. And so now they have a pool that they'll have to transfer all the data off and recreate. At least until the VDEV removal feature comes along. But if they had this checkpoint feature and done a checkpoint, done this, realized they made a mistake, roll back to the checkpoint, create a new checkpoint in case they make a second mistake, then do the add with the right keywords in there to actually add it as a log, be happy with it, and then they can destroy the checkpoint and go on with their life. So I very much look forward to this feature getting in upstream, although because of the architecture of it, I don't know that it'll support ever having more than one checkpoint, but I definitely see this as being useful, especially in the appliance type work case.
Yeah, it's also sometimes probably interesting for doing, debugging if you find a special error, so you roll back and try to reproduce the error.
Yep.
That might be something. Can you do, roll back a scrub operation that way? So you take a checkpoint, do a scrub, and then roll back?
Well, in general, the scrub doesn't change anything.
Well, it corrects some.
Well, only if there are some.
Yeah, let's say we had some.
I suppose. Why would you want to undo that? Already.
Yeah, it's unusual, but something that needs considering in this.
I'm not sure which data is included in the checkpoint and which isn't. If it's everything, then I suppose that'll work. I don't know if it's only the top level metadata or if it's all data. I think it is all data, so I suppose you could do that. Yes.
Oh well, we'll see how this goes, and look for it in the upcoming ZFS updates or in the future ZFS hackathons. Are there any announcements yet when that's going to be?
Not yet.
Okay.
Possibly because I rejected the previous proposal for a date. Because it was going to be like the Monday and Tuesday before EuroBSDCon. It's like, but I will be in Paris
again.
already because I'm getting there a couple days early. So no, that won't work. But yes, the other note they have here is that due to a number of technical reasons that will be written about in a second post, dataset reservations might not be enforced correctly while a checkpoint exists if the pool is very short on space. But
yeah, that's the same.
If you're that short on space, you probably want to get rid of the checkpoint.
Yeah, otherwise you have different problems than the ability to.
But yes, we look forward to the next post, which will have technical details on how the feature is actually implemented, and we can really sink our teeth into that.
Yeah, so check that out. Look at the examples in the blog post, and provide some feedback or questions to the authors in case you're interested in that.
And cut. I was trying to end there, and you wouldn't stop talking.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Sadly, we did most of the first section of the show until the first sponsor with just the Two Faces shot. I forgot to switch to the website shot. Whoops. Anyway. Chat room didn't yell at me. Bad chat room. Bad. Bad. Okay. Are you ready to talk about TrueOS?
Sure.
And recording.
Next up is our news roundup, where we have a renew of TrueOS on DistroWatch. So DistroWatch does a weekly newsletter, and this time there's a feature story about TrueOS. And for those people who haven't heard about TrueOS, is there anyone out there who hasn't? So it begins with TrueOS, which was formerly named PCBSD, is a FreeBSD-based operating system. TrueOS is a rolling release platform, which is based on FreeBSD's current branch, providing TrueOS with the latest drivers and features from FreeBSD. Apart from the name change, TrueOS has deviated from the old PCBSD project in a number of ways. The system installer is now more streamlined, and the article will touch on that a little bit later. And TrueOS is also a rolling release platform, while PCBSD defaulted to point releases. Another change is PCBSD used to follow the user to customize which software was installed at boot time, including the desktop environment. The TrueOS project now selects a minimal amount of software for the user and defaults to using the Lumina desktop environment. And that basically, the article starts going through an installation process and how to set it up, basically, writing that most of the installer tools worked fine for Jesse, who wrote the article, and especially liked having backup or easy access to hardware compatibility information. The network module would launch, but he could not get the system to connect to networks, whether he used static or dynamic networking options. And the problem only posed an issue during the installation process. TrueOS automatically connected to the network once the operating system had finished installing, and clicking the Disk Manager button did not do anything. The Disk Manager tool would not open for whatever reason. And then he starts going over to a couple of first impressions from the desktop side. The first time TrueOS boots, the system runs a graphical wizard, which asks us a few configuration questions. We're asked to select our preferred language from a list, in case it's not, because English is the default one or the standard one, and you are probably in a different language area or time zone. And you also create a password for the root account. And then when you are asked to create the user account for yourself, then it's basically up into the desktop environment yourself, because next one is just getting the chance to set the audio up or sound devices in case you have any. And then the next screen basically gives you the chance to enable or disable certain features, IPv6 support, for example, secure shell server, and Realtek wireless driver support. And when that steps all have been completed, the wizards disappear and the graphical login screen appears from Lumina. From here, he basically can sign into the account and then explore the Lumina desktop environment in more detail. And he does that in a little bit more, couple of paragraphs, describing how the panel works and the task switcher and system tray do their work, and a couple of features that the Lumina desktop provides, which are the integration also with the ZFS, and also some new things with like organization and application launchers and all these things that are part of the Lumina experience. There were apparently some hardware troubles. Apparently, some of the hardware didn't detect correctly, but the idea is probably it's just the hardware, not TrueOS itself. And then he continues going over software management, adding packets and doing stuff in the PC Update Manager, TrueOS own package management utility. And from there, also the App Cafe is introduced or a little bit explored. And that way, this is also a good way for people to install software. And he continues going over applications. So I'm not going into all of these details because it's a lot of
This is
text.
a long review.
But basically, from the conclusions, it goes, what he took away from the time with TrueOS is that the project is different in a lot of ways from PCBSD. Much more than just the name has changed. The system is now more focused on cutting-edge software and features in FreeBSD's development branch. The install process has been streamlined, and the user begins with a set of default software rather than selecting desired packages during the initial setup. And the configuration tools, particularly the control panel and App Cafe, have changed a lot in the past year. The designs have a more flat, minimal look. It used to be that PCBSD did not have the default desktop exactly, but there tended to be a focus on KDE. With TrueOS, the project's in-house desktop, Lumina, serves as the desktop default environment, and I think it holds up fairly well. One new service he found interesting but not get a chance to play with yet is SysADM. We had a talk at Asia BSDCon from Drew Levine about that. SysADM is a road administration tool for managing multiple systems. SysADM is installed on TrueOS by default and should make running multiple TrueOS or FreeBSD systems easier for administrators. He writes, the desktop experience TrueOS offers is a bit mixed. On the one hand, he enjoyed the configuration tools, the relatively light memory footprint, and the great ZFS features like snapshots. But I also think that SysADM looks promising as a way of remotely managing computers through point-and-click interface. On the other hand, though, he ran into a few problems with TrueOS. The lack of security updates in the stable repository worried him a little bit, and he thought the unstable branch might move faster than most people would like. Hardware proved a bit of an issue with both of his desktop computer and printer, providing serious hurdles to working with TrueOS. And the operating system worked well in a virtual machine, though, so his issues may have been hardware-specific. All in all, I think TrueOS offers a convenient way to experiment with new FreeBSD technologies and ZFS, and he also thinks people who want to run FreeBSD on a desktop computer may want to look at TrueOS as it sets a graphical environment automatically. However, people who want to have a stable desktop platform with lots of applications available out of the box may not find what they want in this project. He also lists the hardware that he used, so there might be something to look into for the TrueOS project, what went wrong there, and people who want to check that out. It's a longer article than I could go into, but it's well worth reading. So, and if you haven't
I think
tried
his
TrueOS,
graphic problem might have been the fact that it's an AMD APU with a AMD video card, which are not that well supported yet on FreeBSD, and a bit better on TrueOS, but still not quite there.
Yeah, driver-wise, it's still a work in progress. So yeah, check that out. And if you want to play around a little bit with that and maybe try out SysADM as well, then start installing a little TrueOS VM, or if you're that brave on the real system already, and check out TrueOS if you haven't done that already.
Yep. So our next article is a user who has a FreeBSD NAS and needed to run a Linux VM on top of it. For some reasons, I needed a Linux install on my NAS, and luckily FreeBSD has bhyve, the lightweight virtualization solution, and that made it easy and efficient. However, the command line interface for bhyve is somewhat clunky and bare bones, making it a little hard to use, especially when it's your very first time. So they used the VM-bhyve application, and that helped them solve some of that. The requirements for running VMs on top of FreeBSD is to have either Intel's VTX and extended page tables, or AMD's SVM, and then if you have the hardware offload features, then bhyve works very nicely. So they kind of David walks through the basic setup of this, which is installing VM bhyve and the grub2-bhyve packages, and then loading VMM, which is the bhyve driver, NMDM, which is the null modem driver, allows you to connect the serial console of bhyve so that you can attach to it with a serial program. IFTAP, which provides your IP level virtual interface, and then IFBridge, which allows you to bridge the bhyve virtual interface with your real interface and put the bhyve on your regular network. So they set these up they'll be in loader.conf, so they'll be loaded automatically at boot. And then they enable VM bhyve in rc.conf and set some settings. So then they create a new mount point called VMs, and that's where they've told VM bhyve to store its VMs. So they run VM init, and it downloads the templates, and then they create a switch in VM, and then add their Ethernet controller to it. So now they have everything. Then they run VM ISO and give it the path to a Ubuntu ISO. And then they create a new Ubuntu VM of a certain size and a name. And then they do the install.
Yeah, this is pretty straightforward.
Yep. Then they use sysrc to add the new VM they just created to the list of VMs that we started at boot. Do a little bit more configuration, start it, and then fire off the console command. And they can watch Ubuntu boot over the serial console. And that's...
Yeah, this is pretty much what people can do. And for those people who haven't tried out bhyve yet, they might want to try the VM bhyve package, because I think that makes it a little bit easier. Yep. And you can basically install any operating system. It doesn't have to be Ubuntu, but it's a good way to get started testing out bhyve and its features.
So, this week's episode of BSD Now is also brought to you by IX Systems. It was great. I got to hang out with some of the people from IX at Linux Fest Northwest. They had a
booth there?
So they ran the FreeBSD/FreeNAS/TrueOS/Lumina/IX Systems booth at Linux Fest Northwest, which I helped man for a while, answering questions about FreeNAS and ZFS and lots of related things. And they did very good. Quite a few people had heard of FreeNAS and used it at home. I definitely think it's one of the FreeNAS project is one of FreeBSD's strongest inroads into the Linux community. Is that a lot of these Linux users also have a FreeNAS because it is just the nicest solution for storage in NAS at home and at the office.
Yeah. And IX Systems can provide you the hardware for it. It's not just the software side, but also the hardware.
Yes, whether it's their little FreeNAS Mini, which we had set up on the table, and we were actually demoing the new FreeNAS 11 web interface. The new AngularJS one is very nice. But yes, you can get a little 4-drive one, or the FreeNAS Mini XL, which gives you up to 8 drives of storage space. Or you can ask them about custom hardware. Every server they build is custom built specifically to your needs, which always results in a better match for what you're looking for. So you just call them up, tell them what problem you're trying to solve, and they will help you pick the right hardware. You don't have to know which hardware you want, and even if you know which hardware you want, their advice might make you change your mind. Because they know more about which SSD you want for, your slog versus which SSD you want for your L2 ARC versus when you don't need an L2 ARC. and so on. They have the expertise, and their sales engineers can actually help you pick the right components and get your server up and running. And because they're very straightforward, you get an accurate, timely quote, and then when you place an order, you get the system shipped when they say it will ship, and they will test it first, and they give you this handy worksheet to fill out to explain how you want the machine configured. So you decide how the BIOS is configured, and so it automatically turns on when you plug in power, and that it boots off the right drive, and that the OS is installed and configured just the way you want. So as soon as the machine is taken out of the box and powered on, everything will just work, which makes a huge difference for me, because a lot of, I just placed an order for 5 more video transcoders or 6 more video transcoders, and they're all shipping directly to data centers in the States and never coming to Canada. So I will never see these machines in person.
Only via shell.
Yeah. And so it's really important that I can trust my hardware vendor to set them up right, and that they will work as soon as they're plugged in, because that's what makes it happen for me.
Yeah. And they have a nice configurator on their website. If you go to ixsystems.com and then on the server section and then find a server, there's a nice web GUI where you can say, I want this specific CPU, I want this number of sockets, I want this certain number of drives. And there you can already, slim down a little bit the number of choices, and then you can call up IX Systems with your pre-selected choices, and then the sales engineer will tell you the missing bits and which is recommended for your specific application, and then you can place the order.
Yes, they appreciate that a lot of us are, confident in what we need, and we don't want to spend a bunch of time talking to somebody on the phone and having them call us or whatever. So you can just be like, I just email my sales guy, and it's like, I need 6 of these. And they're like, okay, here's a quote. Is that okay? Sign. And it's taken care of. It's great. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, so check out ixsystems.com.
/BSD now, and if you talk to them, make sure you tell them that we sent you.
Yeah.
So then we have this really cool PDF somebody put up on GitHub. It's a...
Yeah, this is Diomedes Spinellis. I think he wrote a book about code reading a couple of years ago. He was in the FreeBSD project before I joined, but he was pretty popular, so he knows his stuff about the operating system, and that's probably why this sheet is so accurate and detailed.
Yeah, so this basically breaks down the various bits that make up FreeBSD into little categories and helps you find little things that maybe you didn't know were there. So it breaks things down. The first section they have is program development, where you have AS, the assembler, CC, the compiler, LD, the linker, NM, which lets you enumerate the object files and so on. And then we have file management. You have ls, cp, rm, mv, etc. But also cmp to compare 2 files to see if they're the same, and make a directory, touch, etc. Multi-user commands like login, chown, chmod, su, who, etc. Number processing, and then text processing. Oops, did I scroll too far? No.
Everything is there that you expect in a Unix system, nicely ordered and well sorted out for you, so you can find which tool belongs in which category.
Like languages like sed, awk, and M4. Network clients like SCP, FTP, fetch, etc. Document processing like all your nroff, groff, roff, troff, etc.'s table, refer, etc. All that kind of stuff. Then we have the administrative and system commands. Right? You have...
This is still user space.
So you have fsck, newfs, gpart, mount, unmount, etc. Networking stuff like ifconfig, route, arp, user management stuff, right? Add user, PW, VIPW, SA, which is your accounting management. Because back in the old days of Unix, you could bill people for the number of hours they were logged into the machine, or the amount of CPU time they used. Scale Engine used that for a long time to bill people for hours of CPU that their scripts and so on that they ran used. All the quota management stuff. And then they have statistics tools like IOStat, VMstat, PStat, GStat, TOP, etc. And then the servers for all the network stuff like SSHD, FTPD, NTPD, RouteD, RPC, etc. And then scheduling tools like cron, periodic, @run, all the RC scripts, that kind of stuff. Then you have libraries lots and lots of libraries, right? The C standard libraries like math and stdio, stdlib, etc. Operating system libraries like fcntl, universal standard, sockets, paths, getops, etc. Peripheral access like curses, termcap, USB, etc. Then you have file system access like get login, get grent, right, for finding out about groups, get protoent for the etc services file, things like that. Data handling, right? You have dbm, dbopen, btree, hash, record number, mpool, queue. That's a really interesting set of macros that's part of the FreeBSD library. Then you have security stuff like SSL, crypto, crypt, etc. Internationalization stuff like catopen, localconf, iconf, all the multi-byte functions. And then threading stuff, right? Like standard threads, lib thread, pthreads, etc. And then after all that, it's time to look at the kernel, right? You have your syscall interface
space,
where you have file management, file I/O, mountable file systems, file access control like ACLs, file permissions, processes, process tracing, interprocess communication, memory mapping, shared memory, semaphores, asynchronous I/O, kernel events, memory locking, file pointers, all that stuff. And you get into, real-time messaging, capsicum, auditing, users and groups, multiplexing, kernel modules, and jails.
This is fairly modern. I mean, including capsicum and all these things. So this is
like generated by. There's a GitHub repo where there's like a script that helps generate this. It's quite useful. And then you have the bootstrapping stuff like the loader. I know too much about that. The configuration settings, like your loader.conf and so on, and also kernel modules, right, where you load all that. And then you get into the fun bits, like, the kernel utility functions, right? There's privilege management, like ACLs, max, and privileges. Multitasking, like kproc, kthread, task queue, software interrupts, ithreads, etc. Memory management, like vmem, UMA, pbuff, sbuff, mbuffs, mbuff chains, just malloc and free in the kernel, and so on. Generic interfaces like nvlist, which is really cool, OSD, socket, mbuff tags, the bit set, which allows you to have a nice set of C defines and macros that allow you to deal with setting and unsetting and checking individual bits in a bit mask, which is really super helpful. Yeah. Then you have your operation stuff like systrace or sysctl, dtrace, the watchdog, the stack command, KTR, which is a debugging tool, the panic command. And then your synchronization stuff, right? You have RW locks, SW locks, all those other SX locks, semaphores, mutexes, the critical sections, conditional variables, atomic variables, the signaling system. And then all your virtualization stuff like CPU sets for controlling which processes can run on which CPUs, all the USB bits, the crypto bits, the RMAN bits, devices and device classes and drivers, and so on. And then we get into I/O.
This is still not everything.
Right, then you have
this is getting interesting.
Line disciplines, TTYs, raw character devices, raw disk devices, the VM subsystem, the buffer and page caches, individual file systems like UFS, FFS, NFS, ZFS, CD9660, ext2, UDF, DevFS, ProcFS, etc. Sockets. It's only a smaller box in here, but it's a huge part of how applications work.
It's important. Yeah, it's a big component.
Yeah, and then you have your network protocols like TCP, UDP, ICMP, IPsec, IP4, IP6, and then NetGraph. It's like, well, there's the NetGraph async, NetGraph ATM, NetGraph BPF, 50 more things, and then NetGraph VLAN. So, lots of different components there. And then
it makes you appreciate the work that these developers are doing.
Yeah, there's a lot to making an operating system, it turns out. Like the process control subsystem, where you have the scheduler, memory management, interprocessor communication, debugging support, and all the other bits. And then we get into device drivers and abstractions. It's like the amount of stuff that FreeBSD has specifically in some of these are pretty cool. Right? You have your character devices like your mouse and keyboard and printers and tapes, but then just Geom, which is a FreeBSD specific thing. Geom, it's got all kinds of stuff in here. So even Geom as a subcategory or a sub-subcategory is broken down into sub-subcategories. Right? You have your geom storage
Yeah.
classes like the Stripe, Mir, RAID 3, RAID 5, and Cat drivers, which allow you to just take a storage device and use multiple disks for it. But then you have encryption and compression, right? You have GELI, GBDE, SHSEC, right? You can actually create a shared secret device where you can give multiple people keys and you need at least 5 of the 9 people to be able to unlock it. Or UZIP if you want to have a file system where the on-disk version is always compressed. Really handy for a lot of things like those little routers where you only have 8 megabytes of storage and you need to fit as much of the operating system as you can into it. Then you have file system specific GM classes like label, journal, cache, MBR, BSD, etc. And then you have the virtualization bits, not necessarily full virtualization like a hypervisor, but the GMD, which allows you to make memory devices, GNOP, which basically does nothing but allows you to get counters or allows you to fake out certain parameters on the disk, or GGate, which allows you to actually use disks off a remote system, or gVirStore, which provides virtualized storage, and lots of other GNOME classes that didn't have time to get in there. You can see the little ... And then you have the CAM layer, which is the common access method, right? Like lets you have one interface for accessing SATA devices or ATA devices, SATA devices, SPI devices, SAS devices, CD drives, tape drives, etc. And then we have the network interface drivers, right? We have all the 802.11 layers like that we just talked about earlier in the show. And then each of those also has the 802.11 drivers, right? We have the IWN Intel driver, the IWM Intel driver, the 810K driver, the Realtek driver, all the different ones there. And then we have the native drivers for network cards, right? We have IFAE, IFAGE, 100 other ones. And then we end with the alphabetical list with IFXL, which is the Intel 40 gigabit network driver.
Yeah, lucky we have those drivers. Yeah, not only those, but in networking.
Yeah, and then we have the NDIS wrapper layer and the NDIS drivers that allows us to use the Windows XP drivers for some devices to provide a common access method.
This is actually really. I was thinking about doing this in my next Unix class, like giving this as an overview to students, where it's like, you are here. This is an operating system. This is all the bits and pieces that make up the operating system. What do you want to hear about?
Yeah, and then this is still a work in progress. So if you look a little further down, the bus virtualizations and the hardware and architecture abstractions are still blank. I haven't got to those parts yet.
Yeah, these bits need to be filled in.
Yeah.
So can people contribute to that?
It's up on GitHub. So if you just look at the URL and get rid of the file name at the end of it, there's a little page that describes the work and has a link to the GitHub. Right, you can see that their plan is also to have a version of this from the first research edition of Unix to kind of show all the stuff that's changed in modern FreeBSD.
Oh, the evolution from there to here. Yeah.
But yes, they have the Unix architecture project over on GitHub, which is github/d/spinellus/unix-architecture. And you can see the file here for V1 and the one for FreeBSD. And you can submit pull requests. I did one for a typo I found earlier. So you can see the pull request is open, where they spelled Ggate with an F instead of a G.
Yeah, the chat room also suggested to add this to the TeachBSD repo.
Possibly, yeah. I was like, maybe to see an even more advanced version of Brendan Gregg's visibility tools, where you break out the different sections of the OS and then have this list of commands that allow you to examine what's happening in that area.
Yeah, I have a couple of those, only to see that there's an updated version, and I ripped out the paper again from my wall in the office and replaced it with the newer ones. Yeah. But these are very, very good to see. Oh, there's a performance problem in this subsystem. What are the tools that I need to look further into this specific part of the OS?
Yeah, like I can just think there's an entire section that's missing in there. Is there's like the tools you use to manage disks, like disk controller manager, right? It's like SESutil and MPS util and MPR util and MPT util and MFI util and lots of other tools of that nature. We didn't really even get into storage drivers. Like there was a section on network drivers, but we didn't even get one on storage drivers.
Yeah, that's a whole lot. It wouldn't fit on all in one sheet.
Yes, this thing will quickly spiral out of control.
Poster size printout.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, check this out. If the ordering and where certain things belong in the operating system, and maybe contribute something to it if you think something is missing. And yeah, it also makes a nice office decoration, I guess.
So, as we talked about the other week, there will be no official CDs for OpenBSD 6.1. However, after
Unless
lots of cajoling, there will be exactly one CD set made for OpenBSD 6.1, and it will be auctioned off. And actually, the auction's running and ends on May 13th, which is only a couple of days from now. So apparently what
yeah.
they did was make up a CD set and then take Theo out to a pub and made him sit there and draw the artwork on it.
Oh, that's
Yes,
how it goes.
An artisanally made collector's edition has been constructed for OpenBSD 6.1, featuring artwork actually drawn by Theo. Like, he took lessons to be able to do this. A short haiku on one of the covers, and the full 3 CD set. It's up for auction on eBay to the highest bidder. And they have a couple of pictures here. You can see it's signed, and it's version 1 of, or disc 1 of 1. There's only one set going to be made.
Yeah,
And
you're the only person owning that.
You can head over to eBay and check it out. It's currently up for sale. The current bid is $5,100 Canadian, which is about $3,700 US. And it includes free express shipping anywhere in the world. So no matter where you are, if you are the winning bidder, they will take care of shipping it to you. And the proceeds will go to sponsor the OpenBSD project.
Yeah, so it's going to a good cause to further the development of OpenBSD. Yep. And you're the only person owning that, and everyone will envy you.
Yep. The first CD will boot your AMD 64 machines and do all those installs. And track 2 contains the 6.1 release songs. And then disc 2 is all the source trees for the different versions. And disc 3 is a SPARC 64 bootable CD. The artwork was all drawn by Theo Durat at the Ship and Anchor Pub in Calgary, Alberta, with artistic direction by Chris Roberts and beverages by Big Rock Brewery.
Okay.
And they have a couple more pictures here. You can see the
and the link to
interesting
the
hand-drawn stuff by Theo.
Yeah, so check that out, and want to get it, you have to bid.
Oh yes, and they also threw in some old stickers that Theo had laying around into the package.
They were still there. Okay, yeah, so you get something for your money, definitely.
Okay, that one is a version of OpenBSD old enough that the logo was still based on Beastie rather than Puffy.
Oh, really? Oh, that's great. Cool. Yeah.
And cut. Okay. Just need. Oops! I need to add one more tab. So we'll do the Tarsnap before the feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, ready? We're still opening stuff.
Yeah, there's a couple of links, but they are further down, so I will catch up.
Oh, okay. Because we're going to go straight through right to the end.
Yeah, it's not so many things we need to talk about in these individual ones.
Right,
but
so we're going to go through them fast, so you might
numbers-
want to open the links first.
Okay. How quick can you talk?
I can talk pretty quick.
How many milliwatsons is that? Not enough. I guess.
Not that many, I admit. I can talk a lot,
Okay.
just not all that fast.
Meetup and the last one. Yep. Okay.
Let me know when you're ready.
Ready.
Okay. And recording. So it's time for the Beastie
Go.
Bits. This week we have, starting with OpenBSD has a list of the hardware that their developers would like to get a hold of. So it says the following list outlines hardware that the OpenBSD project could use. There are a number of reasons why developers need hardware, and it is important to first of all realize the reasons, right? A is to support a specific device, normally one that's rare or new, or to be part of a developer's environment, right? To be able to work on it. Some types of machines may be different in some ways, big endian or unsigned characters and so on, and ensure that developers write code more carefully because it has to support the different types of devices. That said, space and power may be at a premium for some people, so we don't just want everything. If you do not own these devices and want to help, maybe you can search eBay and find some of these older or weird devices they need. If you do the bidding and get the device shipped to us, it really helps us. It is better if developers develop and skip the bidding process, since any time saved would be spent on improving OpenBSD instead. If it is clear which specific developers should be contacted, please do so directly. Otherwise, contact Theodorat, who will pass on the message to whichever developers are in need. Please be very clear as to where you are located. For larger items, it could be that it'll cost more to ship the item than the item is worth, in which case it probably isn't worth the effort.
Right. The full server.
So,
big
yeah.
rack.
General device requirements that they have. Laptops. These die relatively often that they're, the project needs 2 or 3 replacements a year to keep all their developers in laptops. Apple Mac PowerPC equipment is getting older and harder to find, so they need that to keep the PowerPC port working. HP J6750 machines and J5700 is the second best. I don't know what those are, but apparently they need some. Faster and smaller SPARC 64 machines. For instance, 1U rack mount machines. A lot of the machines they have are awfully large and take up a lot of space. So getting some smaller ones will allow them to keep up with SPARC 64 without having to have that extra space. Although, didn't they just drop support? No, they didn't. Never mind. Okay. It is important to spread SPARC 64 around the development community since it's the most strict platform for detecting non-portable and buggy code. Any AMD 64 or faster i386 hardware that which becomes available, so maybe they could use a couple of Kaby Lake systems. And generally, we do not need any older or very common ISA or PCI equipment since our developers generally have gotten their hands on that already. But in particular, what they have on their list of needs is 10 gigabit Ethernet cards. So David Gwynn, who's in Australia, and Claudio Jecker, who's in Broadcom, Emulex, and QLogic 10 gigabit NICs for driver development. I might be able to bring a couple of DAC cables or something to EuroBSDCon with me. Could hand off in person maybe to Claudio. Then they also say they're looking for an ARM64 box for porting development in France. The Raspberry Pi 3 is too slow, so they're looking for something a little bit bigger. And if it could ship from within Europe, that'd be great. And they have a contact there. They're looking for Dell servers like 1750s that have, or they're looking for just the DRAC cards for some Dell machines, some Longsung hardware, or some Octeon hardware. And a couple of other specific bits like RJ45 SFPs that are supported by Cisco, I might actually have one or two of those somewhere. Not actually sure where they are at the moment. And so on. Anyway, they have a list there of specific things and where they would want them to go.
Yeah, so people should check that out. And
Yep.
if they have some hardware lying around that's still working, I might add, they want to donate that to OpenBSD
Yes.
for driver development and platform support.
Yep. FreeBSD also takes such donations. They have some information there on their website about how to donate whole computers and how you can go about getting a tax credit for that if it makes sense, but also specific components. Basically, there's a mailing list you can mail saying, I have one of these to donate, and they will try to find someone who could make use of that and connect the two people and sort out the shipping.
Yeah, if you have certain things that you find interesting that would be helpful to donate to FreeBSD project, then get in touch with them. They also have a hardware donation form for you to fill out in case you need to receive a tax receipt, and they can facilitate the transaction.
Yep. So on to news. NetBSD has announced their accepted Google Summer of Code projects.
That's always exciting each year to see which students are working on which operating system projects in the Google Summer of Code.
Yep.
So what do they have this
So they
year?
have Leonardo Takari will work on multi-packages support for package source. Maya Rashish will work on LFS cleanup. And Utkarsh Anand will work on Anita supporting multiple virtual machine systems and more architectures within them to improve the testing coverage.
Oh, okay.
So they're
So-
currently in the community bonding period until May 30th, which gives people time to get up to speed. And some of these people haven't done that much with various BSDs before. So they need to figure out how to get the source code and play with it and how to talk to people.
Yeah, the learning phase
Yep.
is there definitely.
The coding period will then start basically in June and run through August 21st. And then there'll be evaluations, code submission, and announcement of the results on September 6th. Good luck to all of our students and their mentors, and look forward to their work in the free NetBSD project.
Yeah. So this is always nice to see at EuroBSDCon, because by then the projects are done, and sometimes
There'll be
or
presentations
relatively
about them,
often the
and- yep.
students are there, to present their work and how far they got in their specific projects. The same is also for the FreeBSD project. So they also have a list on the FreeBSD wiki
Yep.
about the
We
summer of code projects
accepted
they have.
9 students at FreeBSD. So Brooks Davis will be mentoring one for importing a better merge sort into FreeBSD. I'll be mentoring a student who I actually met at Linux Fest Northwest. Kyle will be working on the new
Nice.
boot environment manager, the library, and some tooling around that. Hans Peter will be mentoring a student working on USB dump, which will basically allow you to watch data packets on the USB bus with a tool like Wireshark. So that'll be super handy for debugging. Roger will be working with a student on porting OpenBSD's BusDMA grant handler for Zen on FreeBSD. Martin Matuska will help a student integrate MFS BSD into the release building process. So instead of Martin having to build MFSD manually for each release of FreeBSD, it'll become part of the release building process, and we'll also get MFS BSD builds for the weekly snapshots. That'll be super handy.
Yeah, that might be something worth investigating further once it's done.
Edward Thomas Navarala, who was actually a Google Summer of Code student himself a number of years ago, will be mentoring a student who builds a NVMe controller emulator for Beehive. So you'll be able to simulate NVMe devices in Beehive, which will be really handy.
Yeah, that's promising.
Christoph Provost will be mentoring a student who will try to port OpenBSD's PF testing framework to FreeBSD, testing both rule parsing but also packet passing. Adrian Chad will mentor a student who's going to port 802.11n and hopefully 802.11ac for the Intel IWM drivers. So the newer Intel drivers will get 802.11 and 802.11ac support into FreeBSD, which will be good. And then Brooks Davis will also be mentoring another student who's working on smoke testing all base utilities. So just simple tests to make sure that the utility, not only did it compile, but that it'll actually somewhat run. The these tests will be very simple. It's not necessarily making sure the tool does the right thing, but making sure it actually, outputs its usage message or does a simple operation rather than, a core dump or something, which will be very useful in testing these utilities on things like MIPS and Raspberry Pis and so on, where you don't even want to run the whole test suite because it'll take a while and so on, or just to have better coverage, test every single utility and make sure the binary is actually usable rather than, not having a
Something
test for
broke
every
in the
single
middle.
utility.
Yeah, so good luck to those Summer of Students as well.
Exactly.
Summer of Code students. Yeah. And yeah, we'll see what kind of results they will have at the end of the project period. And the next little bit is about the LibreSSL 2.5.4 release. And we have a little bit of write-up about what kind of changes are included in the release. So they reverted a previous change that forced consistency between return value and error code when specifying a certificate verification callback, since this breaks the documented API. When the user-supplied callback always returns 1 and later code checks the error code to potentially abort post-verification, this will result in incorrect successful certificate verification.
And that would be bad.
Not desirable. They switched the Linux get random usage to non-blocking mode, continuing to use fallback mechanisms if unsuccessful. So this works around a design flaw in Linux get random, where early boot usage is in a library, and in that library makes it impossible to recover if get random is not yet initialized. So there's an important change to get the random bits.
So if you try to use it too soon, it will break and never work, which is really not helpful.
Yeah, especially in an SSL library. They also fixed the bug caused by the return value being set early to signal successful DTLS cookie verification, and this can mask a later failure and result in the positive return value being returned from SSL_get_client_hello when it should return a negative value to propagate the error. And last bit is they fixed the build error on non-x86 64-bit systems running Solaris.
Yep. So check that out from the latest mirror. Cycle. That's LibreSSL 2.5.4.
Yeah, to get the latest.
Then we got Charmbug, which is the Maryland area BSD users group, is going to be having a Tor browser bundle hackathon.
Oh, interesting. On Thursday, May 25th.
At Onyx Point in Hanover, Maryland. Goal of this meeting will be to discuss any bug topics and general issues, followed by our first BSD hackathon. The goal of the hackathon will be to try to get the Tor browser bundle, which has been ported to OpenBSD, to work on FreeBSD. Some of this work has already been done, but the port is not currently a part of the FreeBSD ports tree. The idea is to fix that. Ideally, at the end of the hackathon, there will be a pull request or check-in based on the work from all the attendees to help this project along. Everyone in attendance will be able to contribute and learn something new about the FreeBSD ports tree and building an application on FreeBSD.
Yeah, events like these can go a long way of getting your code contribution into the project and also making your first step with the code, and maybe that will lead to a commit bit one day.
Yep.
Yeah, so if you are interested in that, check that out on meetup.com and join them if you are interested in hacking a little bit on the system for making yourself secure on the web called Tor.
Mm-hmm. Then we have the call for testing for
the package source con.
Yes, I think they meant CFP, call for papers.
Oh,
this is just a reminder. Right, we told you about this one last week, but a reminder that the package source conference, which is not just for NetBSD, it's for all the operating systems that package source works on, which is pretty much all of them. Their event will be July the 1st, and they'll have a day of talks at the British Computing Society, thanks to the Open Source Specialist Group. So if you're interested, please submit. They are looking for talks, and they can be as short as 15 minutes. So you don't have to do a whole hour.
Mm-hmm.
So email Sevan, SEVAN, at netbsd.org, and hope to see some people there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And next up is our favorite BSD and nonfiction author, Michael W. Lucas, blogging about experimental price cuts. He writes basically that he spent last weekend at Penguicon, for those people who were there, doing a whole bunch of panels and presentations, as he usually does, as well as talking with readers and hobnobbing with his fellow authors. Yeah. As a result of those discussions, he's trying something new and slashing his fiction prices. And so basically novels are down to $2.99. Even the brand new Git Commit Murder, which is still freshly new, so people who haven't checked that out should get it with the new price. Immortal Clay is down to 99 cents only because it's the first in the series. Novellas are down to $1.99, and short stories are all 99 cents now.
Yeah, so
that's cool.
Git Commit Murder, very strongly recommend. For 99 cents, you can't go wrong with Wi-Fi and Romex. Great short story.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a crossover between fiction and nonfiction there, which is nice. Not every author will be able to do that.
Yes. Also, I saw a discussion recently. He's considering raising the price of the tech books like FreeBSD Mastery ZFS from $24.99 to $25.01, because then Amazon will offer you free shipping.
Oh, yeah. That would be worthwhile.
Yes.
I mean, the books in general are worthwhile,
but yes,
free shipping
paying
is a nice...
2 extra cents in order to get free shipping seems like a good deal. So,
yeah, I'm slowly starting to work myself through the PAM Mastery book, and that's also a great read. And I'll probably buy the physical copy.
I understand a number of people are reading that because Doug Erling was actually complaining on Twitter this morning that a bunch of people have contacted him about trying to get it working on weird operating systems
that don't run OpenPAM. Yeah, so that would be interesting to see what comes out of that. But yeah, check out his price cuts and enjoy the cheaper prices. And you might want to buy the book that you probably haven't.
At those prices, you can't go wrong.
Before.
If you're going to BSDCan, you're gonna want to have read Git Commit Murder first. I think it will make the whole thing a lot more fun.
Something for the flight.
And also, if you've ever been to BSDCan, Git Commit Murder, you'll recognize all the concepts and so on. It's really good.
It will be a whole different conference now.
Yes.
Yeah,
you'll look at it slightly differently from then on. And then our last item we have here is actually a video from the weekend. This is actually a video recording of the talk I gave at Linux Fest. I was actually filling in for Michael Dexter, who is now, congratulations to Michael and his family. They now have their third child. But this meant that it wasn't possible for him to go to Linux Fest, but it means it will be possible.
Might want to spend the time with the family.
He will get to go to BSDCan, where originally he was not scheduled to be able to.
Oh, he does.
Nice. I filled in for him and gave a talk about the 12 years of FreeNAS. And being myself, I quickly glossed through all the FreeNAS stuff and then talked about ZFS for half an hour.
As one does. Yes. Did you get a couple of questions?
Oh, yes, there were quite a few questions. I didn't repeat the questions, which is my fault. Sorry. So I don't know how well the questions came through. I haven't watched the end of the video yet. But either way, it's a good talk. Especially,
it's like Jeopardy.
It's a very good question. Yeah, but it's a very good intro to ZFS. If you're, especially if there's people you know who are maybe new to ZFS and or don't know much about it, it's a great introduction.
Or considering a NAS solution and want to check out what FreeNAS is all about.
Yep. Just goes through the history from, was it 2004 to today as well?
It's been a while, yeah. They have some history now, 3 generations. That's impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I consider it really 4 generations because I consider as soon as they got ZFS, it became a whole new generation, even though the UI didn't. But anyway.
Yeah, just the addition of ZFS is worth bumping a whole new generation.
Yeah. Okay. So the feedback segment, what we just went through and what we will go through later, is brought to you by Tarsnap. Go to tarsnap.com/BSD now and start doing your backups. You know, Tarsnap's process is quite simple. You run the command line that looks a lot like tar, except for you specify the name of your backup and it goes to the cloud instead of your local disk. But it reads the files you indicate, it segments those files into chunks and deduplicates them so that you won't upload chunks that are unchanged from before. It creates hashes of those blocks and caches them so it knows what's already in the cloud, so you don't have to download a full list of what you've already uploaded. So it finds the new unique blocks. It then compresses those, making them smaller. It then encrypts and signs those blocks and sends them out to the cloud. The encryption key never leaves your machine, so you're the only person with the encryption key, and that ensures that no matter what happens, you're good to go. But no one else can read your files. And then when it's time to restore, you can just grab any one of those archives, and it basically contains a full backup. Even though you only uploaded a small amount of the changes, on the far side, it was reduplicated. So the archive actually contains all of your unique blocks, so that when you download it, you can just restore all of your files very easily.
And it's supported for a number of architectures and platforms, not only the Linux distributions that you usually would encounter, the Debians, the Red Hats, the Gentos, but also the BSD, FreeBSD, NetBSD, and OpenBSD, as well as macOS 10 and Windows also. The Windows subsystem for Linux is there.
Allows you to use the Debian package on Windows.
Which is an interesting option for people that are still on the Windows platform who want to check out Tarsnap and using the encrypted storage that he provides.
Yep. So in this example, Alice has 7.5 gigs of files on her laptop, does the new backup. The total amount of change data is only 2.2 megabytes, and that actually compresses down to 0.81 megabytes. So uploading that costs less than a cent. And then the storage of 15.2 gigabytes of data up in the cloud only costs $3.95, meaning that Alice's monthly cost for backups will be less than $5 a month.
Which is very, very cheap.
Yep.
Yeah, so check out Tarsnap and report anything that you might know about this to our feedback section, which is going to start right now.
So our first question comes in from Don. He's asking about reproducible builds. What is going on with reproducible builds in the BSD world? Baptiste Toussaint and Ed Mast went to the World Reproducible Builds Conference and talked about it a bit. I think the FreeBSD-based system, if you set a couple of specific flags, is currently reproducible. And the ports tree, I think, is about 80% there. So we're definitely making good progress.
Pretty close, yeah.
He says, what are the thoughts on the BSD folks on the whole process? It's definitely getting there. Quite a bit of work went into it. Some of it's not on by default because, especially for development purposes, having uname contain the date you built the kernel and the SVN revision number is very useful. But releases are going to ship without that now so that they will be reproducible. I don't think we're quite as far as NetBSD is, and where you can build the exact same CD ISO.
Isn't there a switch that you can say build this reproducible or not?
Yes, so there's that for the build system, and that will build individual files reproducible, but I don't think it actually makes the ISO image perfectly bit for bit exactly the same, whereas NetBSD has. I think part of it is like if you do the memory stick, when we use MakeFS to make the file system image, the GUID of the partition is unique each time. So there still might be a couple differences, but the actual files you can definitely reproduce bit for bit. Like you can definitely build exactly the same kernel and know that the kernel is perfect. It's just I think the actual final packaging in the image I don't think is quite there yet. But you can definitely build FreeBSD reproducibly today if you're building head.
Yeah, if you want to check out the latest status report, must be from Ed Mast at AsiaBSDCon.
Probably, yep. And there's also FreeBSD is built automatically by Debian's reproducible tracker as well. So you can actually see the results there. As far as being easier on BSD or Linux, our source.conf setup makes it quite easy. You just say, with reproducible build or whatever, and it builds it that way.
Yeah, and the FreeBSD wiki also has 2 pages about reproducible builds. If you use the search function there, you find the one about reproducible builds in the base system and the one for ports with some steps that you can try out yourself and report anything that you might find.
Yep. So then they ask, what's the deal with GCC versus Clang? How's that whole project going? On almost all architectures, FreeBSD is built with Clang. I think it's Spark 64 is not there yet, and I think MIPS isn't quite. Spark 64 is probably not going to be worth doing, so it will stay GCC for now. Although part of the plan for that is to be able to just say install a newer GCC from ports if you want to build those architectures, rather than us keeping around the old GCC forever. Has it been working out as expected? I think so. Things have gone quite well there. Pluses, definitely we have a modern compiler with better warnings and lots of interesting things. Minuses, Clang takes a bit longer to compile than GCC. It's definitely bigger and heavier in a few places, but a lot of the features are quite nice.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a programmer, you want to compare the error messages that they give you when you have a programming error, like a missing semicolon or something. Compare that with the Clang output and the GCC output, for example, and you can see that the LLVMs are much more likely to point you to the right direction, and also give you better.
It depends. If you're comparing the
messages.
GCC and base, you have to realize how old that is too.
Right, that's still true. But you can also try it out with the ports
version. You can
version.
use GCC 5 and 6 from ports as well, yes.
Yeah. But in general, I like the versions that the LLVM project provides, not only because it's optimized in a different way, but also the helpfulness of the error messages. It's
when it puts a little caret and says, right here, you probably want to add an ampersand or remove an ampersand or add a semicolon. It's quite useful.
Yeah. And these little things could save you hours in programming time just to scratch your head and figuring out what the problem is. Just try a different compiler and maybe you have a better idea of what the problem is.
Yep. So next, Architect asks about C development on BSD. Says, hi guys, I love the show. Can't really think of any sysadmin-like feedback for the moment. Unless you feel like it does some sort of Dan-like deep dive on jail administration, which I suppose we could do. But he says, I've been learning C with KNR's ANSI C book and have just been curious about how to start grabbing data from the system, like RAM usage. I know I could probably work backwards from the source code of a program like Top, but I'm hoping that since Alan's been working on the BSD loader and even ZFS, he could help point to some resources of getting deeper into C and even the toolchain it prefers. Yes, personally I use Valgrind and dtrace, so they're both quite useful. As well as if there are any benefits of using Clang instead of GCC, I think so. Clang's warnings and error messages are a lot nicer, I find. Although I guess with modern GCC, maybe it's better. I haven't really used GCC much lately.
Yeah, they've been catching up a little bit, yeah.
To get a lot of those stats, your best bet is the sysctl system call, which allows you to get data from a sysctl, which is how Top does most of it as well. It's kind of FreeBSD's equivalent to /proc, although we had /proc first, but that's beside the point. Yeah, sysctl is probably the best way to do a lot of that type of stuff if you're looking at different RAM usage counters. Realize that some of those counters will be in pages, which are, there's a separate sysctl that tell you how big a page is, but on your regular AMD 64 machine, it'll be 4 kilobytes. So the numbers might not look right, and you might have to actually multiply them by the page size in order to get
some conversions,
the number that makes sense. But yes, you should be able to easily get the numbers from Top, or to match what Top has. Luckily, for pretty much all of libc and all the kernel interfaces like that, there are great man pages built into FreeBSD. So if you actually get to the right chapter and get the man pages for sysctl, it will even have some example code on how to do it and so on. He says, are there any particular resources you'd recommend as far as looking into file system kernel design? Well, there is...
Where's my book?
My copy of the book is buried under 8 other books at the moment, so it's a little hard to get. But there's the Design and Implementation of the FreeBSD Operating System, 2nd edition, which came out 2015. It's a textbook, basically, that walks through all of the different subsystems of FreeBSD and explains how they work and talks a bit about the data structures that are used and so on. I definitely think that'll be a great resource for getting started, or it's also just a great reference to look up, how a particular data structure works. And like I mentioned, the man pages about all the kernel subsystems are very helpful. Like, if you run into an NV list, there's great man pages that explain how they work. I helped Marius translate some of those from the Polish in his head to English on the paper. But yeah, especially for that stuff. If you want to go even deeper, Kirk McCusick offers some online classes. Well, they're in-person classes, but they're recorded, and you can buy just the video from it. There's one where it's just intense kernel code reading. So the entire course is just about reading the code in the kernel and actually basically explaining how all of it works to you. And then I think there are 3 different courses, and he cycles through them, redoing them each year and making them better and teaching.
Yeah,
the
you can
classes
find
in
it on
person.
his homepage at mccusick.com.
He says, I know that some guests love to give Linux and most of the supported file systems a hard time. It's only because they can be so much better with how popular they are, but they never seem to be enough time to get further into. And then some of the Cantrell's rants, which are both entertaining and informative, but there's just not enough time to dig further into it and why Illumos BSD does X better than Linux, other than the whole rm-rf/ thing. He says, any pointers or resources you could direct me to, greatly appreciated. In general, if you stick to the common libc stuff, your application will work on FreeBSD and Linux just fine. When you get into special cases are things like getting the amount of RAM in use from a sysctl, because there is no corresponding concept on Linux. So then you might have to have a little if-def, do this little bit of code to get the number on FreeBSD or this bit of code on Linux, and the rest of the application could be the same.
Yeah, I mean, those are always nice, and people are looking out for those, but it's kind of a trade-off. I mean, it's not just ranting, and it's also how you put the proper design into it, and the whole engineering approach about it. That's probably what his intentions are. And I mean, he presents it a little bit different, but it's the core message is basically use engineering knowledge because it's there for a reason, and the best engineered systems are those who have been thought about and not just thrown out there and put together because there was no design at hand. It's better to think about something first than rushing into implementing it. That's what I get from it. And if you look at a couple of his talks at YouTube, you find the basic question or the basic philosophy there. And I guess that's the engineering-driven approach. That's the thing that he wants to get across.
Yep. Okay, so the next question is from David about the Linux ABI. He says, hello, Alan. Hello, Benedict.
Hi, David.
He says, I love the show and watch it every week, and then the murders begin. He says, I wish to proceed on your last discussion on how to get involved in the development of FreeBSD project as a concrete example. I'm listening. He was listening to a streaming video from Jordan Hubbard where he stated that the choice of using Docker via Linux in a beehive was made because he didn't think it was practical for FreeBSD to try to keep up with the Linux ABI emulation. And I would say that while it's not necessarily impractical, we definitely have not been able to keep up at this point. But that's because there's, as far as I know, 1 or 2 people working on it instead of a larger number. So if you'd like to get involved, please do.
Yeah.
To do that, one should keep a table of all Linux available ABIs and monitor all these and which are implemented and those that are not yet implemented. Yes, there's a bit of that on a wiki somewhere, but I don't know that Linux actually provides a handy list of all the different ABIs and when they get changed. But this is my understanding is that the Linux ABI emulator is much lighter and more efficient than going by all the layers needed to run Docker on top of Linux, on top of Beehive, on top of FreeBSD. As a remark, SmartOS took the same Linux ABI road, and so did Windows, to be able to run Linux applications on top of their OS. So it seems like it's a doable thing. I don't know what kernel version the SmartOS one is up to, but there may be some way we can borrow some of that work to get caught back up. They say the first difficulty that the user had was that I tried to figure out what Linux ABIs were already implemented. It was very difficult to figure out from the source since it's split in a number of different areas like Linux KPI, Linux linprocfs, and linsysfs. Well, linprocfs is specifically the stuff that backs /proc, and linsysfs is for /sys. So those ones are kind of separated. The Linux KPI stuff is mostly the stuff used for the driver porting layer. So that's used by things like the Mellanox, Ethernet, and InfiniBand drivers.
And those receive frequent
Yes,
updates in
the
HEC, at least.
KPI is kept up to date, but I think it's what it supports is a limited subset of the KPI required to make those drivers. And I think in TrueOS there's the updated bits to be able to do the graphics stack as well. But most of the AVI you're going to be looking at for userland code is going to be in that Linux directory. The only documentation they found on the design and its implementation is not up to date. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Documentation, yeah, it's a whole different catch-up game.
Yes, what reference of the Linux AVI is used to collect them for the present implementation? That's kind of part of the problem, is that there isn't necessarily one. I would say right now our target would probably be CentOS 7, but that's locked on a 3.18 kernel, I think, and we probably would like to get up to a 4. something kernel. So maybe something else makes more sense, but I think getting to what CentOS 7 is would be the biggest win for us right now, and then moving forward after that.
If you're looking for a cross-reference between FreeBSD and the Linux kernel, there is fxr.watson.org from our Robert Watson, where he does a basic Linux cross-reference, which file is which in the other operating system.
Like, where's this function implemented in different operating
systems
systems and so on. It's a generic code cross-referencing tool based on an open source tool. You said the third difficulty is what is the design of the ongoing Linux ABI emulator. Lately, I've seen a lot of commits to the Linux KPI part, and what is its target, what Linux version will be implemented, and which Linux ABIs must be implemented. The KPI's target is being able to make network card drivers like the Mellanox driver and the InfiniBand driver, and then hopefully eventually the Linux Intel DRM and ATI DRM drivers be compatible enough to provide the shims required to be able to run the Linux drivers for the graphics and the networking stuff on FreeBSD as unmodified as possible, so that they can easily track the changes upstream. So the Linux KPI is kind of unrelated to the Linux ABI emulation. So Linux KPI is about running kernel code like drivers, whereas the Linux ABI stuff is about running a userland application and converting its calls into the FreeBSD kernel's native code. So I think your best bet for now is just ignore the Linux KPI stuff and would focus on just the Linux directory there and working on the bits to make an application work. I think currently what we're targeting is CentOS 6, which is Linux kernel 2.6.32. But we would like to go forward and support CentOS 7, which I think is 3.18. I don't know how many differences are there. I know one of the missing things is the iNotify system call, which is required to run things like Dropbox and basically get notifications about when files change. I don't know that much more about it.
Yeah, I mean, many of the software is also now available in FreeBSD ports because people spend time to, port it over. But some systems are only some software is using the Linux parts and the bits that are only implemented in there. It's very difficult to port those, so you need either virtualization
the Linux
to get
ABI
yourself.
Compatibility was always specifically meant for being able to run commercial software that comes as a binary. Like MATLAB and so on, where you couldn't just compile it for FreeBSD.
There's no.
The world has gotten slightly better in that there's a lot less software that is Linux or that is shipped as binaries, but the world has also gotten slightly worse, where there's a lot more software that's only targeted at Linux, not at all Unix or POSIX operating systems and so on. And especially with things like systemd and applications becoming dependent on that, I don't know what the future of the Linux ABI is.
It would be interesting to watch, definitely, what kind of developments are happening in theirs and our systems, the BSDs and the Linuxes. And it's an interesting time. I mean,
I think for your specific questions about this, I imagine the FreeBSD-emulation mailing list might be the best place to ask these questions. Sadly, I think part of the answer is that, exclusive of the Linux KPI, where Hans Peter and Matt Macy and some other people are working on stuff, I think the Linux ABI stuff is pretty much down to just one person working on it in their spare time. And I don't know that there's a larger overall project goal of trying to support, say, CentOS 7 compatibility, partly because CentOS 7 requires systemd.
Right. Yeah, that's the limit in that regard. Okay. But yeah, We'll have to see how it evolves.
So you want to read the next question?
Okay. Yeah. The next question is from Tom. He says, "Hi, BSD Now. Please keep up the good work. You give us a broad view and updates on what is happening in our BSD world. Thank you. First, in the segment, a new patch for OpenZFS in last week's show, episode 188, he apparently got a myth busted. Seen many places on the net, like post 3 in this thread, so he links to the forums on anantech.com, where there's an issue with ZFS RAID Z, and he continues, basically the myth is optimal. ZFS performance is achieved when the number of disks equals 2 to the power of n plus z, where z is the number of parity disks, i.e. one of the optimal RAID Z2 is 2 to the power of 3 plus 2 equals 10 disks. And but seeming the performance graphs in last week's show, it looked like there was no obvious performance gain for those above mentioned configurations. As best, they have minuscule speed advantages, right? They're probably optimal disk space wise because of less padding, but again, according to last week's graphs, there are no obvious performance improvements. So do you have anything on that, Alan?
Matt Aarons wrote an article about it in like 2014. Yeah, June 2014, called ZFS RAID Z Stripe Width, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love RAID Z. Where he basically explains that, yes, it's a myth. There's no real major advantages. He has some handy spreadsheets that actually show what is the optimal layout as far as padding goes, because the answer on that one changes depending on your block size and your number of disks. So how big each block is and how many disks can drastically change those values. The other thing that messes up this generic myth is compression. Because LZ4 is so good now, and we use it for basically everything, it means that the blocks are almost never exactly 128K anyway. And so then all that math that the myth is based on doesn't even make sense. So here's a RAID Z1 chart, and you can see with, say, 8 disks versus 10 disks, and then you have your block sizes here. You can see with, I think, 8 kilobyte blocks, you're pretty much 25% waste always. Whereas if you, which one's which? Sorry. This is block size, but in sectors. So 8 sectors would actually be 4 kilobytes. So at 4 kilobyte block size, you're wasting 25% no matter what. Whereas if you can go up to, say, 16 kilobyte blocks, or this would be 8 kilobyte block size, your waste is only 13%. And then here you can see that if you're going with the 128K block size, going with 8 disks has 15% waste, whereas 10 disks has 12% waste, but that's about the only difference. And then once you get up to the higher number, you're really not gaining much. And then, so here's only the sizes that actually are practical use. And we can see that with the RAID Z1, you're going to have 100% waste if you're using single sectors and so on. And then down here, we see that no matter what the block size is, your waste is about the same. Anyway, it explains it in more detail. I've added a link to it in the show notes to one of the original authors of ZFS explaining why it's a myth. So it might really help you win that argument in the forums.
Okay. And the second part of his question is, on his FreeNAS ZFS with default compression, I have a series of older full backup images of the same pooter from the pre-ZFS era. The file changes between each image are at most 30%. His question is, to save disk space and as an exercise, I would like to transform those images to a dataset with the images as a series of snapshots, like it would have looked originally using ZFS. Can you think of a simple way or a script to do this? And can it be done without excessive disk I/O and computations?
So these are like individual image files?
Full backups of older
Right. Well, he says
computer
full backup images, because if it's
files.
The equivalent of a tarball of the individual files, then you could extract it, snapshot it, extract, snapshot, and so on. In particular, with the individual files, when ZFS is doing the write, it does the compression, and if the two blocks are the same, if the compressed block that you've just made and the compressed one on disk have the same checksum, it skips writing it, saving you a lot of I/O. But if it's an image file, it depends if it's manually compressed or compressed in line. Like, if you can take the uncompressed image file and write it, snapshot it, overwrite it, snapshot it, then you can gain some stuff. But if the compression is kind of built into the image file format, then the chance of your blocks actually aligning is probably not that great. So it depends if it's an image file that is then compressed, and you can uncompress it and basically overwrite the uncompressed file with each different version and keep the snapshots. Or if this compression is built into the image file format, then there's probably not a great way to do it because the blocks are never going to line up. But if they're just image files and the compression is separate and you can undo it, then I would create a new data set, extract the oldest one, snapshot, and then extract newer ones over it, and it will avoid doing writes when the individual blocks are the same. You might get better hit on that by using a smaller record size on that data set, like 8K or 4K instead of the default 128, because then there's a better chance of a block being the same and not having any modifications. Because, if one bit is different, it's going to replace the entire 128K block, not just the one bit. So using smaller chunk size might get you a better advantage there. Although you have to watch out, if you're using RAID Z2, too small of a record size will waste more padding.
Yeah, and that was not desirable.
So yeah, it depends on what
format
you have the files or images in.
Yeah, depending on what kind of things you back up there.
So last question.
The last question is from Ivan. He writes, it was very nice to watch Chris on this show, but I have to admit, Benedict is just amazing as well. Seems like a very, very smart guy. Oh, thank you. I don't get that very often. I always say I have good teachers and I'm still learning. So let's leave it at that. Anyhow, I have this weird thing with updating jails with EasyJail admin command and was hopeful you might point me to the right solution or explain why it is doing this. I've already opened up forum posts on the FreeBSD forums, but haven't received feedback on it, and he has the post linked into the show notes as well. The initial jail was deployed with base jail, EasyJail admin install -p, and after that he simply created these jails. All packages within it are installed directly from package, so that helps me keep them simple and tidy, which is nice. Yeah, this is the way to do it. When he's running update on the jails after updating the host system to the latest -p release, he gets the following error. Basically, no such file or directory in .freebsd-update in /boot/kernel.old.
Right. So that is an error that's safe to ignore. It's basically that particular patch for FreeBSD includes an updated kernel, and because in a jail you don't use the kernel, EasyJail didn't install the kernel. So it never created a /boot directory, or rather it links to an empty /boot directory, and that empty /boot directory is mounted read-only in the jail, and so the update command fails. It's safe to ignore that.
Not every error is a real error. That's
yes. The other popular one they used to see was there was I think in the 9 series, there was an update to OpenSSL that added a new file to the source code, and you would get this error about user source crypto blah 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 not existing because I didn't have the source code package installed, and so the directory didn't exist.
Okay. Looking at the directory structure for user.jl's new jail, I can see there are some broken symlinks there. Yeah, that's probably.
Oh, so
part
the
of that.
symlinks aren't broken. They're just relative to the root of the jail. So when you're inside the jail, those symlinks work. It's just from the host, they don't look like they work, but they do work from inside the jail.
To change the root.
Yeah, so it's got 3 jails here, www, sites, and cloud. Inside those, there's a read-only directory /boot /base jail, and then things like USR and SBIN and so on are symlinks to that base jail directory, so that all the common parts of the operating system only have to be installed on your system once, not once per jail, and it means that you can do FreeBSD update just once. But they are read-only, and so you'll have that problem to make.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that should go away then.
Yes, and he says, I have a confession to make. While writing this email, I learned a lot about how this setup actually works. So in general, it seems to be working how it's supposed to be working. And there's just a little error from FreeBSD update when it's trying to install the new kernel because you don't have a kernel and that directory is read-only. Mm-hmm. But it should be fine. Inside the jail, you can do uname minus capital U, and it'll print the version of the userland, and uname minus capital K, and it'll print the version of the kernel, and you can compare them and make sure. There's also the FreeBSD-version command on new enough versions of FreeBSD that will print the version of the userland that you have, including the patch level, allowing you to make sure that you actually have the version you want to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a way to compare userland and kernel and figure out whether they're really in sync with the base system. All right, then, yeah, thanks for submitting your questions this week, and we still wait through the ones you people sent to us, and we're reading through all of them.
So if you submitted a question and haven't got an answer yet, don't worry, we're getting there. But do please keep sending new questions because we always want more.
And it's not just us answering the questions, it's other people listening to them, and they might provide a follow-up, or they might have similar problems, and they're like, oh, that's the solution. And then, it's not just one person getting the help, it's many people that are watching these. Mm-hmm. All right. That's it for this week, I guess.
Yes, it is.
So have a nice week, and see you next week.
Bye. And cut.
Woo! All right, let's remove this alternate title here. Little cheat sheet for me.
Yeah, I think it's a pfSense 2.5 that's going to be interesting, where they remove all of the PHP altogether. I don't know exactly what's going on there, but it sounds interesting.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, just a minute here. Okay. switch the shot.
This week on the show, we are looking at the bring up of the 802.11ac in FreeBSD Wi-Fi stack. The pfSense and OpenVPN tutorial is there for you to check out. And we also take a little deeper dive into ZFS storage pool checksum projects, which might be interesting for you to look into. It's not just projects, it's one. Right, checksums they have already. Yeah, they covered that. It's Checkpoint. How could I came up with checksum? Anyway, sorry about that. And it's just one project, not multiple. Second time. This week on the show, we're going to show you about the bring up status of 802.11ac on FreeBSD, talk about a little bit of pfSense and OpenVPN and show you a tutorial about that. And we dive into ZFS storage pool Checkpoint and the projects that's been developed around that. And, oh, come on, let's remove. Need a teleprompter. Okay, yep. This week on the show, we're going to tell you about the bring up of 802.11ac on FreeBSD, a tutorial about pfSense and OpenVPN, and we tell you a little bit more about ZFS storage pool checkpoints. So this is my fourth time. Nice. A new record. Yeah. It's yeah, I mispronounced something. Yeah. I don't know. One more time. This week on the show, we're doing a bring up of 802.11ac cover story on FreeBSD, show you a tutorial about pfSense and OpenVPN, and tell you a little bit more about ZFS storage pool checkpoints, which is an interesting project for you to check out. And everything is going to be presented on BSD. Now. Woo! Next time we invite guest people to do these intros. Just have to figure out a way to record those up front, and they send us little video parts, and or they do, I just do the lip movement and everyone else can do the audio, which would be interesting. Probably not.
Okay, news roundup, feedback for a total episode length of 2 hours and 5 minutes. We're really good at hitting that 2 hour mark, aren't we?
It's something about that. Yeah, there must be a special thing we have in this 2 hour. But we had no interview this
otherwise
week.
It would have been a 3 hour bloody episode.
For the long drive, wherever you're going.
Like, look at this. This episode when we interviewed Josh Petzel, an hour and 40 minutes. Here's one where we interviewed Ryan Yao, an hour and 22 minutes.
Did I see that one?
That was a ZFS on Linux guy.
Oh, I might need to rewatch that. I can't recall.
And then we got
the
one where we interviewed Jim Brown about his sprinkler setup. That was an hour and 25 minutes.
Okay.
Michael Dexter about something. That one was 2 hours and 20 minutes, but Dexter talked for an hour and 20
Yeah,
of those
that's
minutes.
easy for him. And it's good stuff. I mean, you don't want to stop him.
Oh yeah, then we had the Brazilian robot one from BSD Can. That was an hour 45.
Oh, has that been?
Yeah,
I wanted to
that
watch
was
that.
last summer. I was just picking random episodes, comparing lengths. Oh, there's Chris's
Yeah, it's
unboxing
always-
video of the FreeNAS Mini XL. That one was only 42 minutes. That was a short episode. Oh, I think that we were
But it
away
was an
for that.
interesting twist on the
Yeah.
show, like having this unboxing stuff.
Oh, then we had the Willem Troop, the DNS guy. That one was 2 hours.
Mhm.
Anyway, that's that.
Yeah, next time we'll do a 24-hour live stream just for fun.
Nope.
No way.
All right. I got that.
I think the chat room would like that, but it's not gonna happen.
Live is weird. I don't know if we ever. I don't think we actually used the footage. Linux Fest Northwest 2015. Chris and I did like 2 hours of live at the conference talking.
Oh, okay.
Like we
With
sat
the-
at a
like with the
table
chat
at the
room, or-
conference and just talked and interviewed people and talked to the chat room.
And there was a camera somewhere and
Yep.
a mic.
Well, no, we were all kitted up.
Huh? Ah, okay. Yeah, well, that could work. But we'll hunt people down at conferences usually.
Yes,
to
we will
get their
arm
interviews.
twist all of the people at BSD Can.
Yeah. They just need an extra day for us doing interviews just for that.
Well, yeah, maybe if we can get a couple done on like Wednesday and Thursday, that'd be great.
Yeah, let's see. Wednesday, I have the foundation
No,
board
no,
meeting. Oh,
the-
that's
Yeah,
Tuesday.
that's
yeah.
Wednesday and Thursday are the
would
Dev
work.
Summit days. Well, partly I'm
Mhm.
in Dev Summit stuff most of that day, so it might be difficult.
We'll split up and come from
Well,
different angles.
we could also cheat and do what I did at FOSDEM, which is I just used the mic and we just stood out somewhere kind of quiet and just talked to them with no picture.
Yeah, that could also
You know.
work. I mean, it gives us material
it's
for
like in
future
particular,
episodes.
if we can get a picture of the person to slap it on, it works good enough to edit into
People
the
want to
episode.
listen and
All right, I'm going to record a bit of B-roll to help Rakai fix up the intro graphics.
oh, with the outros.
Oh no, for the intro graphics to
Mhm.
replace Chris's face with your face and update my face and that kind of thing.
Your face doesn't need much updating.
Well, that picture is from 2012. It's 2017 now.
Yeah, but still, there's not much. The diff would be relatively minimal.
I suppose. Anyway,
Yeah, but freshening it up, it's good. Yeah,
okay.
people want to.
I'll see you later.
All right. I'll spend a couple of hours over there.
Over where? Oh yes, sleeping. Sleeping is good
Yeah.
because it's what 10 o'clock for you. 10:30.
10:30.
What time do you normally go to bed?
But yeah, this is usually the time where I go. Depending, I mean, tomorrow I can go in a little bit later if you don't tell my boss. But if I have appointments with students, then I'll be there. And but there's nothing on my schedule surprisingly tomorrow. But I have a couple of things I need to work out, and I want to do some more PAM configuration on the cluster. Let's see how that goes. But with Michael Lucas books, I don't think I'll run into big troubles.
All right then. Talk to you next week.
All right. Thanks again. Bye, everyone.